In 1976, Great Britain experienced one of the most extraordinary summers the country had ever seen. The heatwave intensified in June after months of unusually dry weather, and the temperatures just kept climbing. On the 28th of June, Southampton reached 35 degrees Celsius, and the hot, dry conditions continued for weeks. For ordinary families, this completely changed everyday life. Gardens dried out, lawns turned brown, and suddenly everyone had to be very careful with water. The government introduced restrictions on using garden hoses, and by August, some parts of the country were facing serious water shortages. In certain areas, standpipes were installed in the streets so people could collect water. Families kept their windows open at night. Fans suddenly became incredibly popular, and people headed to the coast whenever they could. Paddling pools appeared in gardens, kids played under sprinklers, and ice cream vans suddenly became very busy businesses. The drought became such a serious national problem that, in August, the government appointed Dennis Howell as Minister for Drought. Meanwhile, the heat was making the headlines almost every single day. Britain had plenty of sunshine, but very little rain. And for a country famous for complaining about the weather, 1976 gave Britain something completely different to complain about: too much of it. Britain, 1976. Let's see what happened. On the 20th of September, 1976, at 9 o'clock in the evening, BBC Two premiered a television masterpiece that would become one of the most celebrated dramas in British television history, I, Claudius. This 13-part drama was pure chaos, greed, lust, and murder. Based on Robert Graves' famous novels, the story is told by the elderly Emperor Claudius as he looks back on the bloody and twisted history of the Roman Empire. We're talking about betrayals, political assassinations, family poisonings, and endless mind games. It was basically the Game of Thrones of the 1970s only, with sharper dialogue and practically no special effects. And was it a success? Absolutely. Despite its tiny budget, and the fact that almost the entire series was filmed inside rather basic studio sets, the performances were extraordinary. Sian Phillips, in particular, was unforgettable as the ruthless Livia. The series became a huge hit with British audiences, attracting millions of viewers and eventually becoming a worldwide success. It proved that historical drama didn't have to be stuffy or boring. It could be dark, scandalous, and incredibly entertaining. The series was also recognized with several major awards from Britain's television industry. Not bad for a show filmed mostly in a studio. But television in 1976 wasn't just for adults looking for somewhere to hide from the heat. If you were a kid back then, your afternoons were about to be taken over by some absolute legends. It all started on the 5th of January, when BBC One introduced Britain to a very polite little bear called Paddington. And this wasn't just another children's cartoon. Paddington was made using a clever mix of two-dimensional artwork and stop-motion animation, giving the character a look that was completely different from anything else on British television. Voiced by the brilliant Michael Hordern, Paddington was polite, curious, slightly accident-prone, and absolutely obsessed with marmalade sandwiches. The little bear from Peru quickly became a favorite with British children, and eventually became one of the country's most recognizable characters. But the BBC wasn't finished. The very next day, on the 6th of January, another children's favorite made its debut, Rent-A-Ghost. If Paddington was warm and wholesome, Rent-A-Ghost was completely bonkers. The idea was simple enough. A group of ghosts ran an unusual rental service, hiring themselves out to living people for all sorts of strange jobs. There were Victorian ghosts, medieval characters, ridiculous costumes, and plenty of classic British slapstick. Kids absolutely loved it. And later that year, television became even more colourful. On the 5th of September, The Muppet Show arrived on British television. Today, it is easy to think of Kermit, Miss Piggy, and the rest of the gang as purely American. But there was a very British story behind the show. American networks had initially turned the idea down. Then British producer Lou Grade stepped in, helped get the show made, and brought production to Elstree Studios in Hertfordshire. Suddenly, British families were sitting down together every week to watch Kermit, Miss Piggy, and the gang completely lose the plot. And that was television in 1976. 1 minute, a polite bear with a marmalade sandwich. The next, a gang of ghosts or a room full of very loud puppets. And somehow, millions of British families couldn't get enough of it. But while Britain was dealing with all the heat, politics, and chaos of 1976, something rather extraordinary was happening in the skies. On the 21st of January, Concorde carried its first paying passengers, with the British aircraft taking off from London Heathrow. Developed jointly by Britain and France, Concorde looked like something from the future. It could fly at more than twice the speed of sound, making the journey from London to New York in just a few hours. For passengers, flying across the Atlantic suddenly felt like something out of a science fiction film. It was expensive and certainly not for everyone, but Concorde became a huge source of British pride. In a year filled with economic problems and political drama, Britain had managed to put a supersonic passenger jet into the sky. For a moment, the future had finally arrived. In March 1976, Britain was caught off guard when Prime Minister Harold Wilson suddenly announced that he was stepping down. He officially left office the following month, bringing an unexpected end to more than 8 years at the top of British politics. Wilson had been one of the most recognizable political figures in Britain. He had won 4 general elections, so his decision came as a real shock. Almost immediately, rumors started flying. Some people believed he was suffering from serious health problems. Others went much further, claiming that MI5 had somehow pressured him into resigning. None of these theories were ever proven, but they certainly gave the newspapers plenty to talk about. Wilson was replaced by James Callaghan, who inherited a country already struggling with inflation, unemployment, and a growing economic crisis. ABBA dominated the British charts. Dancing Queen was everywhere. Queen brought a whole new sound. Somebody to Love was everywhere. And then came Eurovision. Brotherhood of Man won the whole thing with Save Your Kisses for Me, a ridiculously catchy tune that Britain simply couldn't get out of its head. It shot straight to #1 and became one of the biggest hits of the year.
Coast to coast, Yorkie and me rolling on, 'cause a long day's run.
And welcome to the Seven Oaks Grand Prix. Hattie Jakes versus Jackie Stewart. The loser to buy lunch.
That other pub wasn't a good idea. Why are we here?
I will follow you anywhere, sir.
Tart and bitter.
Favourite tea bags, PG Tips.
Only these tea bags have the famous PG Tips tea taste. PG Tips tea bags.
But amid the political chaos and the scorching heat, 1976 turned out to be a brilliant year for English football. And nobody had a better year than Liverpool. Under manager Bob Paisley, the Reds won the First Division title in dramatic fashion. They only needed a draw in their final match against Wolverhampton Wanderers, but thousands of Liverpool supporters had travelled to Molineux, filling the famous South Bank Terrace. Wolves took the lead, but Liverpool fought back and eventually won 3-1. The celebrations were absolute chaos. Fans poured onto the pitch before the final whistle, while thousands more celebrated in the stands. Liverpool were champions once again. But they weren't finished yet. In Europe, they faced Club Brugge in the UEFA Cup final. After 2 thrilling matches, Liverpool won 4-3 on aggregate and lifted another major trophy. The Reds had conquered England and Europe in the same season, and for Liverpool, this was just the beginning of something much bigger. But the chaos of 1976 wasn't just happening on the football pitch or in Parliament. British cinemas were having a pretty wild year too. In March, David Bowie made his big screen debut as the lead in The Man Who Fell to Earth. He played an alien who arrives on Earth looking for water for his dying home planet. Strange, beautiful, and more than a little unsettling, the film was unlike anything else in cinemas at the time. And with Bowie at the center of it, it became a real cult classic. Then, in June, things got a whole lot darker. The Omen arrived in cinemas and introduced audiences to Damien, a seemingly innocent little boy with a very sinister secret. The film was partly shot in Britain, with locations around London and the English countryside, and its gruesome deaths made it a proper talking point. It became a huge box office hit and one of the best-known horror films of the 1970s. So, while Britain was dealing with heat waves, political drama, and football fever, the cinemas offered something completely different, an alien from another world. And a little boy who was definitely not what he seemed. But as 1976 came to an end, the biggest shock of the year wasn't happening in Parliament, on the football pitch, or even in the cinema. It happened live on television. Queen had been booked to appear on the Today programme, But when Freddie Mercury had to pull out, the producers needed a replacement. So they invited a little-known punk band called the Sex Pistols. Then came the 1st of December. During the live interview, host Bill Grundy provoked the band, and the Sex Pistols responded with a string of insults and swear words that left viewers absolutely stunned. The next morning, the newspapers went wild. Suddenly, this strange new punk movement was national news. Their record deal with EMI was soon in trouble, concerts were being cancelled, and the Sex Pistols had gone from an underground band to one of the most talked-about groups in Britain almost overnight. And just like that, 1976 ended exactly as it had begun, with Britain completely caught off guard.